Hello everyone, my name is Filiz Çakir Phillip. I co-curated the exhibition Hidden Stories, Books Along the Silk Roads together with Susan Conklin Akbari. The exhibition was on display at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto until the end of February 2022 and was concluded with an international symposium co-organized with and hosted by Institute for Advanced Study Princeton, Hidden Stories, Global History, Local Networks. The exhibition has a digital component, which is generously supported by University of Toronto. Today, I have invited a distinguished guest, Professor Jonathan Bloom, to talk about the so-called Blue Qur'an and its origin and production. He is an expert in the history of Islamic art and architecture. His research, together with his wife and colleague, Professor Sheila Blair, on the arts of medieval Spain and the history of Cairo has inspired all of us. His research includes the history and development of the minaret, the art of the Fatimid dynasty in North Africa and Egypt, and the history of paper. He is the author of the award-winning book, Paper Before Print, The History and Impact of Paper in the Islamic World, published 2001. Professor Bloom, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and welcome to our virtual conversation. My first question is about this enigmatic manuscript, the so-called Blue Qur'an. How was this, now dispersed manuscript, produced and where? There are many discussions about its origin.
Thank you, Filiz. The first thing one should say is it's the most recognizable manuscript out there of the Quran, because you don't need to know Arabic, you don't need to know anything, and you can see it, and it's so remarkable for its blue background and gold lettering, gold writing. It appeared to modern knowledge around the turn of the last century when a collector acquired some leaves, he said, in Constantinople, now Istanbul, and he thought that it had come from Iran, from Persia, but later research has suggested that it actually was produced in North Africa, in what is now modern Tunisia, sometime in the medieval period. One of the reasons for that is that the bulk of the manuscript actually survives in Tunisia, in Tunisian libraries, and so it's thought that sort of having the most of it suggests that it had most to do with that place. Some people have said it was made in the 800s. Some people have said it's made in the 900s. No one knows exactly for sure, but my feeling, my impression is that it probably was made in the middle of the 900s in what is now modern Tunisia, in a very splendid fashion. It had 7 volumes that were kept together in a wooden box. It must have had about 600 or more separate leaves that were kept together. So it was quite a splendid and very expensive affair.
You mentioned most of the folios were found in Tunisia. Were they in a university library or they were in a mosque?
They were in a mosque. It is thought there is a catalog of the contents of the library of the Great Mosque of Kairouan in Tunisia, written around, I think around 1300, that mentions a manuscript, a dark colored manuscript written in gold and silver that was kept in this box. And that's the only mention we have of a manuscript like this. And so it suggests that it was in this mosque library until the 20th century. Well, most of it was in the mosque library until the 20th century, when the pages in Tunisia were largely taken to the capital, to the museum and the library in Tunis. I think one set of pages may have been taken in the 16th century, when in the 1500s, the Ottomans conquered Tunisia and may have taken this as a gift or been given it as a gift and taken it to the capital of the Ottoman Empire in Istanbul.
You mentioned the manuscript was kept in a wooden box. How I should imagine, they were bound in a book binding, or they were loose?
Yeah, well, all the pages, no, they were bound together. They were bound in separate volumes, in 7 volumes. And all of the pages that we think came through Istanbul were from the first of those volumes, which had the early chapters in the Quran. So one imagines that perhaps someone just took the top volume out of the box and left the remaining ones. There is some record in an auction catalog from about 20 or 25 years ago of a leather cover for the manuscript, but that seems to have been made in Istanbul in the 16th century, so a later edition.
I see. And you mentioned the archival information that manuscripts on dark pages in gold, and now we absolutely know it's indigo dyed. Would you like to talk about the origin and the production, the process of producing?
Sure. So when I first looked at this manuscript, which was close to 40 years ago, we always assumed that it was dyed, it was parchment that had been dyed blue with indigo, which is a vegetable dye made from plants. And it can either come from indigo, which is grown in India, or from woad, which is available in Europe and the Mediterranean world. But I think the pigment is essentially the same. But a conservator explained to me that you cannot dye parchment because parchment is made from animal skin that's been stretched and dried. And if you wet it to dye it, then it shrinks and gets all wrinkly. So you have to color it in a different way. And basically you're putting the color on the surface. So what we imagine is that it was sort of the indigo or was like a pigment that was rubbed on the surface to give a very deep blue color. Once that is done, then the writing had to be done. And originally we thought it was written with gold ink, which would be made by grinding up gold to a very, very, very fine powder and then mixing it with a medium like gum arabic or something to make it flow. But it turns out that under a microscope, if you look at the letters, you can see that they're not painted on, but they're made of gold leaf, which is extremely thin gold that's been beaten between sheets of parchment until it's microscopically thin. And then what you do is you write in a transparent medium, something like glue or egg white. You write do the calligraphy, and then you put this very thin gold on, and it only sticks where the writing has been. And then you use a soft brush or blow on it, and it blows away all the excess gold. So you have the writing left there. But the edges of the writing are often rough from where the gold has sort of broken away. So the calligrapher had to go over every single letter with another pen and outline all the letters in dark ink to sharpen the edges. So it was a lot of work.
Yes, it really sounds enormously time consuming. I can imagine it must be very expensive, and it is not something that you could find very easily in the market. That must
no. I think it was a special commission. And the other thing you have to realize is that the parchment sheets are the 2 pages together that they were folded in half. 2 pages were folded. It's called a bifolio. So that was 80 centimeters. 80 centimeters wide and 30 centimeters high. So what that meant was that you could only cut 1 or maybe 1.5 out of every animal skin. So in order to make this manuscript, you had to slaughter, we assume it would have been sheepskin. So you had to slaughter something like perhaps 600 sheep.
Oh my goodness.
to make this one manuscript. So thinking about it, it just shows you how incredibly expensive it was.
And it's also probably a reason why we are talking only one single Blue Qur'an. So there is no other, example of this style or of this manuscript, or no other copies.
Right. What's interesting is that the only place where I know of that other manuscripts were sort of inspired by this one, is in Tunisia, that several hundred years later, there's another manuscript that was produced. It's now in Paris in the Bibliothèque Nationale, that is done on dark colored paper and written in silver and gold, and which suggests that someone saw this manuscript and said, oh, what a neat idea. I'll do another one like it in a contemporary style of script.
For later generation artists, it was inspirational, you say?
I think so. And interestingly enough, nowhere else do we see that kind of copying or inspiration, which again suggests that it's been in Tunisia for a very, very long time.
Another reason to locate the production of this manuscript, that geography.
Right.
I have one question that strikes me since I was involved in the exhibition, and we were creating a specific section about book and the body, and we were looking at the gorgeous textile fragments, tiras fragments from Royal Ontario Museum here in Toronto, and which is also indigo dyed with golden letters. I wanted to ask you if you see any artistic and geographic relationship with the tiras textiles produced in Egypt and Blue Qur'an from your perspective.
Well, they both are produced, I believe, under the patronage of the Fatimid rulers of Egypt. They founded the city of Cairo in 969 and ruled until 1171. I think that the Blue Qur'an was made in North Africa before they moved to Egypt, and whereas these tiras textiles are clearly the work, Egyptian work, from the linen with which they're woven and the style and the date that we can tell by the name of the ruler, etc. So it shows that there's a sort of continuity of liking blue and gold. And some people have said that there's a symbol, some sort of symbolism, mystic symbolism in the use of blue and gold and stuff. But blue and gold is one of the oldest combinations known to man, known to nature. The combination is found naturally in the lapis lazuli stone, which is mined only in Afghanistan, where you have this beautiful blue stone that has little flecks of what appears to be gold, but they're really pyrites or fool's gold in it. But this combination was so striking that you have ancient Mesopotamian cylinder seals made out of this material, which would have been exported all along the Silk Road, for example. Or Tutankhamun's death mask, is also has gold and blue. It's a wonderful combination that people seem to have loved in almost every culture. So I think that, why should we expect that the Fatimid rulers of Egypt and North Africa were any different from the Byzantines or the Umayyad rulers of Syria? That people liked this. They thought it went well together.
I was about to ask you if you see any explanation in this color coding from Blue Qur'an, blue, gold on blue, but thank you so much for referring also different cultures and different geographies, and it's so interesting to see actually in the lapis lazuli that blue and gold is existing in nature.
Right.
I assume the people were inspired by nature, and it is visible, and they can relate to their own life, their own style, their own culture, and then they have also transferred this color coding into their artistic creation. What about, you mentioned the Silk Road, what about Asian cultures? Do we have similar effects?
I know that there are Chinese manuscripts that are written on blue paper with gold calligraphy, but that would have been with gold ink rather than with the gold leaf. So certainly this technique, this color combination, was universal as far as it's certainly across Eurasia and North Africa. What I found very interesting, and I never realized before, was that blue is a very strange color to use for a Quran manuscript. Because of all the colors in the rainbow, blue is the one that's only mentioned once in the Quran itself, and it's only in a very negative way. And that blue is often considered, particularly in North Africa, a kind of unlucky color. But what I realized is that so much of what we identify as a particular color, as blue, is culturally determined. And that, people don't say in medieval Arabic, for example, you didn't say that the sky is blue. The sky is green. It's the word khadra, which means green and life-giving, and also has all sorts of very positive. And so it's not that the sky was green in the Middle Ages, but that the culture saw blue and green as basically the one color, and in a very different way from the way we divide the spectrum up today ourselves.
I was also struck because usually when we look at the Islamic art, green is the most elevated color, looking at the mantle of prophet,
right.
Looking at the descriptions of paradise and the greenish, and the entire garden culture, green becomes much more prominent in terms of Islamic art. But I was so inspired by your explanation how the different shades of green take us also to the color of blue, or how people are looking at and exploring the sky or the nature from their perspective. And then I think we need to remember ourselves all the time. We cannot look from our perspective and make judgment or
right.
assumptions before existing centuries or cultures. So it's very interesting how we can shape, so to speak, our understanding, or how we welcome looking at the different cultures and different centuries artistic productions.
I think that we forget that the rainbow, the spectrum, is a continuum, and that we've decided that it's yellow and orange and red and green, blue, violet, indigo, that we've given certain locations on that continuum specific names. But that doesn't mean that they have any sort of objective reality. That one could very well decide that blue-green was the primary color that one wanted to work.
I have one other question. We discussed the Blue Qur'an. We mentioned the Tiraz fragments. I'm sure you have also examples within Islamic art and architecture, other examples where we see this wonderful combination of blue, gold on blue.
Absolutely. That one of the reasons why people have attributed the Blue Qur'an to so many different places is because you find this combination elsewhere. So the first example is at the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, which is the first work of Islamic architecture built in the late 600s. And that inside there's an inscription in mosaic, in glass mosaic, where the writing is in gold on a blue background. And this is understood to be a technique that was inherited or developed in Byzantium, and that the workmen were trained in this technique. And so they just continued an earlier tradition of using blue and gold. We know from literary sources, although actual examples haven't survived, that this technique was, this color combination was also used in Baghdad, in Iraq in the 8th and 9th century. And certainly one of the most glorious surviving examples is in Cordova in Spain, in the mosque there, where the area surrounding the mihrab, or the niche that points in the direction of Mecca, was surrounded by inscriptions in gold and blue. Some are written in gold on blue, and some are written in blue on gold. And, you know, with also in this mosaic technique. So there are examples from basically all across the Islamic lands where you have this combination.
Wonderful. I thank you so much for this conversation, and looking forward to meet you in other conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you.